Hi fellow investors. Is investing an art, a science or a craft? In art there are elements that can be taught. However, it's the underlying creativity of the artist that defines his or her greatness. It would therefore not seem that investing is an art. The laws of physics, mathematics and science are universal. They are absolute and there are no exceptions. While investing is scientific at times, there are also times when it is most certainly not. And we would therefore contend that investing is not always a science. A craft, in turn, is a skill that you can learn by doing. We certainly see investing increasingly as a craft. And we believe that as investors we can get better, more skillful, by practicing investing regularly. Benjamin Graham is the author of one of the most important and influential value investing books ever written, The Intelligent Investor. In the preface to the book, he says the following: "To invest successfully over a lifetime does not require a stratospheric IQ, unusual business insights, or insider information. What's needed is a sound intellectual framework for making decisions and the ability to keep emotions from corroding that framework. This book precisely and clearly prescribes the proper framework. You must supply the emotional discipline." It is this intellectual framework for making decisions that Graham alludes to that we'd like to discuss further, as this aligns with Gryphon's focus on rules-based investing and controlling the effect that emotions can play when making investment decisions. While much of this framework involves an understanding of financial markets, economics, industries and individual stocks and bonds, a fair amount involves an understanding of history and human nature, and most importantly, our own individual natures. Incorporated into this intellectual framework, we believe, are a number of personal characteristics that investors can strive to foster within themselves in order to grow their wealth. We'd like to develop this as a personal philosophy. And as with most things, there's nothing new here. This is the wisdom of the ages. We will cover the following 3 topics. Number 1, knowing and trusting yourself. Number 2, greed is good. And number 3, sowing and reaping. We do look forward to you joining us. Thank you. I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all the rest of men, but yet sets less value on his own opinion of himself than on the opinion of others. Marcus Aurelius. Hi fellow investors. In this segment we'll address the adage, knowing and trusting yourself, and why it is so important in investing. For us at Gryphon, this statement informs our behavior in 2 ways. Firstly, we are competitor agnostic. The asset management industry has evolved into a beauty competition, with managers' performance being published on a daily basis. Much attention is devoted to short-term performance rankings as well as the relative performance between funds. Does having 2 stents fitted instead of 3 make you any healthier than your colleague? Yet, this seems to be the prevailing logic in assessing relative performance in the asset management industry. And so our reference to the wisdom of the ages. If you are ever tempted to look for outside approval, realize that you have compromised your integrity. If you need a witness, be your own. Epictetus. Secondly, this paranoid focus on relative performance has resulted in an industry where few are prepared to make bold moves. A review of the performance of most multi-asset funds will reveal how seldom asset managers make bold asset allocation moves. The preference seems to be to rather seek consensus, while the ability to remain competitor agnostic and focus single-mindedly on achieving the best prospective returns for investors. Because we do not subscribe to this paranoia, we are able to trust our philosophy and process completely and to implement our decisions regardless of how we look in a swimsuit. This confidence in our process is reflected in our asset allocation decisions. We are fully committed to an asset class or not at all. If it is time to be in equities, we are fully invested in equities. If we consider the risk of volatility to be too high, we will hold no equities at all. To know, understand and trust yourself requires effort and introspection. We believe that is time well spent. It is after all a wise man who once said, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Thank you. Hi fellow investors. It is often said that two emotions drive financial markets, namely fear and greed. Many of you will remember the 1987 movie Wall Street, where the protagonist, Gordon Gekko, played by Michael Douglas, launches into a speech proclaiming that greed is good. In Gordon's words, the point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all its forms, greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind. We are less sure about this than Gordon Gekko. Based on the greed is good philosophy, one would expect that the more risk applied to a strategy, the greater the reward. However, the risk-return curve flattens out, and investors will in reality experience that beyond a certain point, there is very little return added for the additional risk being taken. We have risk on the horizontal or x-axis and return or reward on the vertical or y-axis. The red line is the risk-return profile. When you take some risk, you are rewarded with some return. Take a little bit more risk and you can expect to generate more return. However, because of the shape of the curve, once you start taking a lot more risk, you generate incrementally less return. As you will notice from the risk-reward chart, more and more risk, i.e. greed, does not necessarily translate into more and more return. In fact, the investor reaches the stage where they are generating return-free risk. We have great respect for the principles embodied in Eastern philosophies which promote wisdom, ethical conduct, and meditation. Here the focus is on the right understanding, right intention, right action, and right effort. These help to achieve a true assessment of reality, harmony, and prevent overindulgence. At Gryphon, we tend to be cautious. Our overarching concern is the preservation of investors' capital. However, this ensures that our investors are appropriately rewarded without taking unnecessary risk. Thank you. Hi, fellow investors. In this piece, we address sowing and reaping. We see a number of similarities in the methods of farming and investing. Planting a crop not only requires preparation, but also an understanding of what you intend to harvest. No one should try and harvest a crop they did not sow. So too, investors should not expect returns that they did not set out to or plan to achieve. Having an understanding of what one can expect from your investments is a critical part of the process. An economically sustainable farmer is not likely to rely on only one crop. They will diversify by crop and by location. as good investors would also do. We would advise investors to hold a diversified portfolio of asset classes and hold those across geographies. As with investing, in farming, the future as it pertains to weather and crop prices is uncertain. Diversifying and being prepared for uncertainty and the unknown is an essential part of both disciplines. The longer it takes for a crop to yield fruit, the more likely it is to be valuable. So too with investing. Investments focused on the long term and delivering returns far into the future will always be more valuable than those focused on the short term or of a speculative nature. There's also a useful analogy between fertilizer and leverage. Farmers use fertilizer to increase the yield on their crops. Investors often use leverage to increase the yield on their investments. But here's the thing. Too much fertilizer will ultimately destroy your crops, and too much leverage will bankrupt your investment. Too much of a good thing, whether in farming or investing, is not always a good thing. Balance is required. Our chief concern currently is that investors have become impatient for returns on their investments. Let's consider this using our farming analogy. Does it make sense to plant a crop and expect a return immediately thereafter? Certainly not. Every crop has a gestation period. We would caution against getting 2 women pregnant if it is your expectation to have a child in 4.5 months. The same principle applies to investing. We would rather advise that you adjust your expectation. And so, as with most things in life, understanding yourself, understanding what you want from the future, being balanced and being patient is essential. In conclusion, patience is the companion of wisdom. Saint Augustine. Thank you.